Hey everybody, welcome. Excited to have you guys here. If you can hear me, if you can see me, let me know in the comments. Today's going to be all about holiday anxiety. If you feel like your mental health is getting strained around the holiday season, there are a couple common situations that occur. There are four big ones that I have been seeing are occurring for my clients, and I've got an explanation as to why those occur. I've got three key rules that I'm setting up for myself, that I've been advising my clients to use, that have been working well for them. I'm going to share with you. And then towards the end, I'm going to also share a little bit about setting boundaries and what are kind of the two master skills of setting boundaries, because I know some of you guys have family situations or friend situations or whatever it is where you feel like you might need to set an appropriate boundary. So if you guys can hear me and see me, go ahead and let me know in the comments and let me know what is on your Christmas list this year. I'd really love to hear. Okay, so let's jump right into it. So in the past couple of weeks, I have been speaking with clients, obviously, and helping them out. And every year around the holiday season, there seem to be a couple particular situations that tend to occur. There are patterns, and my whole line of work is all about patterns. Figuring out why someone thinks the way that they think when they're triggered in a particular way, or why they feel a certain way in response to a particular environment or situation, and helping them design a new pattern. So for many of you, you may notice that the holidays create a particular pattern around your mental health. Let me know in the comments what that pattern is. So for example, do you tend to feel more sad? Do you tend to feel more angry? Do you tend to feel more anxious? Do you tend to feel more isolated? What is it for you? And there are some common things that I've seen over the years, but I've never really put a piece of content out there that's really addressed them head on and kind of called them out for what they are and given some prescriptive steps of how to solve them. So that's what I'm excited about today. So there are four big situations I've been seeing, four patterns that I've been noticing, and these all come from real life situations. Of course, I'm going to leave all identifiable information blank and confidential, but these are, inspired by very real situations that are happening. And I'm going to share with you what I've been passing on to my clients that's been helping them out. So the first most relatable one, I think that just about everybody can relate to in some sense, is feeling overwhelmed. So I noticed this was happening for a couple family members of mine. It was happening for my wife, and I realized that it's just common, there's a couple reasons why people feel overwhelmed, a couple in particular. The first one is there's just more logistics, right? There's planning, there's travel, there's things along those lines. So one key solution I want to advise you on is that if you're not careful, your mind will have a default way of processing things that we call over-chunking. Okay, over-chunking basically means that your brain is trying to process too many bits of information in an inefficient way. And there's a way to solve that. So if you've been feeling overwhelmed about logistics and travel and planning and all that kind of thing, it's kind of similar to like when you first learn to drive a car. And when you first get into the car, it feels like there's 15 different things that you need to be paying attention to all the time, right? So you got the left mirror, the right mirror, the rear view mirror, the gas, the brake, the acceleration, the traffic laws, the stop sign, right? All this different stuff feels like way too much. And it's because to your brain in that situation, you count driving the car as like 15 different chunks. It's like 15 different chunks of data and information. And then eventually after like a year of that, you get to a spot where your brain just thinks of driving the car as driving the car. It just thinks about it as one chunk of information. So now you can drive the car, do your makeup, eat your fast food, talk on the phone, listen to your music, right? All these different things. And so what is happening for I have seen a lot of you is that around the holiday season, you're over-chunking things. So an example of over-chunking things would be, I got to get a present for this person and this person and this person and that person and this person and this person over here. And then I got to do this thing over here. And then I got to go here on this day and this and over here on this day. And then I got to drive to the store. And then when I'm at the store, I got to go down this aisle and I got to, right? And it may sound silly to you, but a lot of you guys are like really over-chunking things. And so it's so simple, it's so dirt simple, but it's very effective, is if you want to reduce overwhelm, and that's one of the patterns you're having around holidays, and this works for any time of your life, not just holidays, is reduce the amount of chunks. So an alternative way of me processing what I just said is, well, for me to get through Christmas this year, we need to buy the gifts, go to the parents' place, and eat the food. And that's it. It's just 3 chunks. Okay, and a little golden tip for you, anything over 3 chunks will always feel overwhelming to some degree to the human nervous system. So you can chunk it down like that. Or you could say, well, I really only need to get gifts for my parents, my siblings, and my friends. That's it. Right? So it may sound silly to you, but if you learn to process and language things differently, you will reduce overwhelm. You will reduce a logistic overwhelm. Now, there's a different type of overwhelm that can occur that I think a lot of you guys can relate to, which leads me to pattern number 2, which is really seeking to please people. And I think that some people relate to this a little bit more than others. I think in my experience, a lot of my clients recently who are mothers are really leaning into this. It's not exclusive to them. But basically, if your mind is getting populated with a lot of thoughts about what if this person thinks this and what if this person thinks that, and I got to make sure I show up here because otherwise they're not going to like it, and what if I don't show up early enough and we got to make sure that we get the right kind of gift because we don't get the right kind of gift, they're not going to be happy enough, and well, did I spend enough money on this person? If your mind is going down that rabbit hole, then let that be something that gives you the awareness that you've got some people-pleasing patterns going on. And they probably show up in lots of different environments, not just around the holidays, but they probably feel exacerbated around the holidays. And I had a client who just recently had this happen. She was doing a event right after Thanksgiving, basically, and she was going to organize it and have all her family and her friends over. And she was so worried about everyone being happy. And there were a couple family members, and I'm sure you can relate to this, that are basically unhappy almost no matter what. And so if her intention, the term we use for it is your value, if what she's valuing most is other people's happiness, that sounds good and that sounds noble, but if she's putting that above her own happiness, then she's going to be in for trouble. She's going to be chasing after something that she doesn't have full control over. And that's going to be problematic for her. So what I told her instead is I said, look, rather than us defining the game in unsolvable terms, and rather than us defining the game as everyone in your family needs to be happy on the day of Thanksgiving or else you failed, why don't we instead define the rules of the game a little differently and make them far more within your control? And she was like, yeah, I'm interested in that. And I said, look, what if instead the only rule for your Thanksgiving gathering was you're going to have fun. That was your only rule. And she immediately was like, oh, wow. I was like, yeah, that would be a lot easier, wouldn't it? That would be a much easier intention. It's something you can control. And it doesn't really matter if so-and-so is unhappy or such and such doesn't like the food. You can still just have fun. So anyway, that's exactly the intention that she went into that gathering with. And she had a great time. It was a really great experience. There were some members of her family who were pissed off about bullshit because that's what some people do. They just get pissed off. Don't you know this? Like, there are some members of your family, tell me if you can relate to this in the comments if you don't mind. There are probably some members of your family where no matter what is done, no matter what somebody else does, they're gonna be pissed. Okay, I have a couple members of my own family I'm thinking about right now. Okay, it doesn't matter how many backflips you do for them, they're gonna find something to complain about. So if you make your criteria for enjoying the holiday season that everyone's got to be happy, you are fucked. It's just not going to work. It's not going to happen for you. So set an intention that's actually within your control. And I'll tell you, there are 4 really, really good ones. 4 common core values or intentions, whatever word you want to use, that you can use. And you can use these getting through the holiday season. It'll be so much better. Number 1, you could have the intention of variety, or in other words, fun, kind of like the one I just told you about. Number 2, you could have the value or the intention of growth. Like, you know what? I just want to grow my relationships with people. I want to grow as a person. I want to reflect on this past year. I want to get ready for the new year. I want to get to know people a little bit better. I want to deepen my relationship with my loved ones. Okay, so growth could be a theme. The third one would be contribution, where you basically say, I'm just going to give to people. I'm going to give whatever I can. Doesn't matter how much money I have. Doesn't matter how much I've spent on people. There's no contribution too big or too small. I'm just going to give. Whether all I'm giving somebody is a smile to a stranger on the street, I'm just going to be in a state of giving. Okay, that is a very winnable game. And then the final one is love and connection. But the difference here is you're seeking to send love out to other people rather than worrying about what love comes back to you. Okay, that's the key. So with all four of these games, with all four of these values, with all four of these intentions that you could set for yourself, notice they're all fully within your control. That's what makes them powerful. The two that you want to avoid that will spiral you are focusing on either one, certainty, which is like, well, what if this and what if that and what if the presents are late and what if the ice gets on the road and what if dad isn't feeling so good and what if this thing and what if that thing. Okay, if you try to go down the certainty realm where you control everything, you're going to induce anxiety, and that's a disaster. Number two, the bigger one that happens around the holidays is chasing after significance, which means trying to do things to be good enough. Like, is the house clean enough? Is the food good enough? Is it well cooked enough? Is the turkey moist enough? Are the presents expensive enough? Is my holiday outfit shiny enough? Okay, whatever it is for you, like if you're trying to chase after that enough thing, it's never going to feel like enough. So you want to avoid those two and latch on to some combination of the other four. And that is my first big piece of advice for you, by the way, which is set the right intention. This is how you can eliminate holiday anxiety. And these are the rules that I've set for myself and that I've given on to my clients. Number one, set the right intention. I'll give you another example of this. Is I had this leads right into pattern number 3. So pattern number 1 is feeling overwhelmed. Pattern number 2 is seeking to please. Pattern number 3 is feeling excluded. This is another big thing that happens around the holidays. I had a client a little while ago, and long story short, he was disinvited, let's just put it that way, to a family gathering, okay? And, that would very naturally cause some anger, some resentment, some sadness, some feelings of isolation, okay? Things along those lines. And the thing that I coached him to do was to realize that if he set the right intention for the holiday season, him not participating in one particular gathering would be relatively inconsequential. So the story that we will usually create in our heads that makes us feel pain is a story of loss. And what makes us feel a story of loss is true is when we're focused on, am I good enough or can I be certain? So instead what I said is, I showed him that list of those other 4, and I said, which one of those 4 would you like to have be your guiding intention for the next couple of weeks? And he picked fun. He just said, I'm just going to have fun. And I think the second one he picked was loving other people. And I said, great. So as long as you go through the holidays and with every text message, every phone call, every gathering you have that you still are going to do with friends and other family and things like that, you can just fill people up with love and you can have fun. And if you really do that, rather than focusing on the fact that you were disinvited to this one particular thing, you're going to feel like you've got more than enough. You're going to feel an abundance rather than a lacking. And he realized that that was true. And he's already in the middle of doing that. I just spoke with him. He's doing very well. So the power of setting the right intention is very much the difference between feeling like it's never enough and feeling like it's more than enough. That's why you want to avoid those 2 that I mentioned, and you want to latch on to some combination of those other 4. So setting the right intention is really, really important. Also just a good rule of thumb for life in general. Now, the other thing that I'm going to mention here, I'm going to go to some of my rules now. So rule number 1, set the right intention. Okay, rule number 2, take things one day at a time. Now, I learned the value of this when my wife got sick with breast cancer, and there was so much uncertainty. We just didn't know what was coming around the corner. We couldn't anticipate what was going to happen with her treatment and how things were going to affect us and what, whether she was going to respond to it. And what we realized is if we let our mind go too far into the future, it was only going to create anxiety. It was only going to create a problem. So the rule we came up with was one day at a time. Let's just do what we can control today to create the best outcome possible. And with something around the holidays, it's a really good attitude to have too, because when the holidays come, your mind starts forecasting 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 months out, and you start worrying about all these different what-if scenarios. So if you, first of all, set the right intention, like I'm just going to have fun and love everybody, and no matter what, like no matter whether I'm at the grocery store buying food to cook the meal, or I'm at the toy store and it's crowded and it's crazy, I am going to have fun. That is my number 1 intention, priority, and that's my standard for myself. That's what I'm setting. No one is going to fuck with my fun this holiday. Okay, that would be a really powerful way to go into the season if you set that standard for yourself. And then you can take things one day at a time, right? Just focus on, cool, what am I going to do today to love people and have fun? Are we doing Christmas gifts today? Okay, cool. Let's go get Christmas gifts. If not, let's focus on something else. But it allows you to shut the brain off. It allows you to get rid of the what ifs. And if you make it a commitment and a standard for yourself, right, and you build that muscle of focusing one day at a time, it's pretty impossible to feel anxiety. It really is. Okay, so that's number 2. The third rule, okay, is accept what is outside of your control. Now, a lot of you guys don't like this so much, or I should say that you're just not very practiced at it. Okay, and there are 3 main things that are going to be outside of your control during the holidays that could cause you anxiety or distress that you've got to accept. Number 1 is other people's decisions. So that client of mine who got excluded from a family gathering, if he got all hung up in his head about trying to get the acceptance of his family and to get re-invited, that was driving him nuts for weeks and months. But as soon as we said, look, they reacted the way that they reacted because that's the type of person they are. That's the pattern that they have running in their mind right now. That's not within your control. What is in your control is how you respond to them, but you cannot be in control of whether they invite you or don't invite you. So we got to accept it. That's the only thing we can do is we can accept that and then set a positive intention for how you want the holiday season to go and empower you to make the holiday season how you want it to go, not necessarily depend on other people acting a certain way towards you. And so when he really got that and he said, yeah, it's their decision and I don't need them to alter their decision in order for me to have a good holiday season, and he really got that, then all of the relief and peace of mind flowed to him really quickly. The second big thing you cannot control, you got to accept, is other people's opinions. This relates more to the female client I was just talking about who hosted a family gathering. She knew there were going to be people who were going to be irritated and pissed off. Before I gave her the coaching, she was running in her head a million miles an hour trying to figure out what could I possibly do to make sure that they approve and they have a good time and they have fun. But they're not the type of people who have fun. So instead, her rule changed to, I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure they have fun. I'm going to do whatever I can to love them. But fundamentally, I'm going to accept that their opinions are outside of my control. And I'm not going to, obsess over it. I'm just not going to do that. And then that brings us to the third and final thing you cannot control, which are other people's rules. Other people's rules means like other people's expectations, other people's rules for being loved, for being validated, for being appreciated. All of these types of rules tend to get aggravated and exacerbated around the holiday season because, by the way, people have rules. And by the way, a rule is just a belief about how things should be. People have rules that are specific to the holidays. So like people have rules, for example, like you didn't call me on Christmas, you don't love me, for example. Now, their rules may not be the same as your rules. So you might text them on Christmas and say, hey, I love you. Merry Christmas. Hope you had a great holiday. And they might get pissed off by that. But guess what? You can't control what their rules are. You can control what you do. You can control if you send them loving energy, but you can't control their reaction. And if you make it your priority to try to control their reaction and make sure they react a certain way, you're disempowering yourself. You're convincing yourself that the only way you can have a good holiday season is if other people act exactly how you would prefer, which is just BS. Okay, not going to help you. The fourth piece of advice I have for you is to decide what you make things mean. And so I'm going to share with you the story where I uncovered this. I just did a session with somebody earlier today or yesterday. I think it was earlier today, actually. And I love this client. She's a beautiful soul, older woman, and she had lost her husband a while back. And she had this little story that she was telling herself that Christmas is always sad. That's what she said. Christmas is always sad. And I challenged her and I said, every single Christmas is sad? And she said, well, no, just the last X number of years. I said, oh, okay, gotcha. Well, that's not every Christmas, just for the record. So be careful with always language, right? Universal language is a huge anxiety inducer for you guys, okay? Always, everyone, no one, all that stuff. So I said, if you believe every Christmas is always sad, that's going to create a really, really big problem. And by the way, what is that going to make her feel leading up to Christmas, by the way? Sad, right? as opposed to excited or hopeful or looking forward to it. So I caught that she was using that language. And then I probed into it and I said, well, why do you think Christmas is always sad? And she said, well, I think about, that I lost my husband a while ago. And it had been a while, And so I said, well, it's very interesting for us to proclaim that Christmas is now going to be inherently sad every single year for the rest of your life, just because you lost your husband. And she's an older woman. And I said, look, you obviously knew that one day either your husband or you was going to go, right? Is it really going to empower you and help you to continue to use this story for another, 15, 20, 30 years, right? Because it had been a long time. She'd been telling herself this. And anyway, what I basically was telling her is I said, look, you get to decide what Christmas means. You get to decide what the holiday season means. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying that every single thing that we tell ourselves has a consequence. Every word that we choose has a consequence in terms of how it makes us feel in our body. And if you tell yourself Christmas is always sad, you're going to start feeling sad immediately after probably Thanksgiving or Halloween, right? You're going to start feeling sad for at least 2 months out of a 12-month year. You're going to feel sad. And she realized, that's how I've been doing things for well over a decade. And so I said, cool. So we could tell ourselves Christmas is always going to be sad, or we could come up with a new story. Are you really comfortable with your remaining Christmases always being sad? She said, no, I'm definitely not. I said, okay, cool. Could you see that we need to come up with a new meaning for Christmas other than Christmas is always sad? She finally got it. And I said, cool. So what's the truth? And what she said is Christmas is what I make it. So that's exactly right? It can be any of those things. Christmas can be a time for growth. It can be a time for love. It can be a time for gratitude. It can be a time for all sorts of stuff. And so I think what she ended up picking was gratitude and faith. Because I said, what's going to be the theme of this Christmas? And that's the question I want you to think about and maybe answer in the comments, by the way, right? Like prior to you seeing this video, what were you making Christmas about? What was your dominant belief about holiday time? And then what is your new belief about the holidays? Right? What's going to be the new theme? I very often will do this with clients who've been depressed for a long time. So I'll work with them for a couple months and I'll say, okay, gotcha. So before you didn't really have much hope for your future. And they would have had a meaning about their future like, oh, it's all over. My best years are behind me. I'm never going to feel better, blah, blah, blah. And then towards the end of going through the program with me, I'll say, gotcha, what is going to be the theme of your new chapter of life? And I make sure that they come up with something exciting like, it could be like the rebirth or the renaissance or the glow up or the rebuilding or the exploration, okay? But when you come up with a meaning for something, you change how it feels. And the way that I got my client to realize this is I told her this story that is a completely 100% true story from World War II. And basically, there was this Jewish psychiatrist. His name was Viktor Frankl. He was imprisoned in the Nazi prison camps. And what he realized is that there were basically two different mentalities amongst the prisoners. He noticed that one group of prisoners did well considering the extreme conditions they were in. So they took care of themselves. They ate whatever they could. They prioritized getting as much sleep as they could. They stretched. Okay, they took care of their body to a certain degree. And then another group of prisoners basically just crawled in a corner and waited to die. Like they wouldn't eat, they wouldn't sleep, they wouldn't drink water. They would basically totally zone out. And he interviewed both of these groups of prisoners because he realized it didn't really matter what their age were. There could be like 20-year-olds that were in the defeatist camp, and there were like 70-year-olds that were still like trying and engaging. And what he realized was that the first group all had some sort of a compelling meaning about their circumstances. Now, mind you, these prisoners are in the exact same situation, right? They're in the exact same prison camp, right? But they are responding to their situation very differently. They are feeling very differently about their situation. Now, don't get me wrong, it wasn't paradise for anybody. Right? But the first group of prisoners, at a minimum, they took care of themselves. They lasted longer. They were stronger. They were able to keep their weight on a little bit longer. And it's because they had a different meaning. They had a different set of things that they told themselves. They would say things to themselves like, this cannot end here. My life will not end here. I've got to get back to my wife. I got to get back to my daughter. I have to, and for some of them, it might have even been like resentful, like, I'm going to make the Nazis pay. For the second group, the defeatist group of prisoners, their attitude was, it's all over. God is punishing me. My life is over. I'm dead already. And so they wouldn't try. And so they sealed their fate through the meanings that they gave things. Much like my client was about to seal her fate of never having a happy Christmas ever again in her entire life, because she had already had this mantra of Christmas is always sad for going on 20 years. So I told her that story, and I said, look, you get to decide what you make things mean. There are plenty of people who have lost their spouses, but they're not continuously telling themselves a story of what they have lost. There are plenty of people out there who've lost cousins and uncles and friends and family, but they're not focused entirely and primarily on what they have lost. Okay? And that's the key thing to remember. You don't feel things based off of your life conditions. You feel things based off of what you tell yourself about your life conditions. And you feel things based off of what you selectively focus on about your life conditions. So if you focus on everything you've lost, then that's what you're going to feel, is loss. If you focus on everything that you have to gain coming up, you're going to feel excited. And so she came up with a new mantra, and her new, or not a new mantra, a new intention, I should say. And I said, what is this new Christmas going to be about? And she said, gratitude and faith. And I said, great. And I was like, how do you feel now that you've proclaimed that for yourself? And she was like, I feel amazing. I feel so much better. I'm like, that's right. Because we didn't change your life at all. All we did was we just changed the meaning that you were giving to your life. And that's what changes how you feel. So that was a really powerful moment. Now, I'm going to wrap things up now with how to set boundaries, okay? Because I've been getting a lot of questions about this recently. If you are a parent and you share your kids with an ex of yours, for example, I just got a text message about this the other day, like, hey, how do I set boundaries with my ex around my kids? Another situation I encountered recently was a middle-aged woman, or a later-aged woman who's got an adult daughter, and she wasn't sure how to set a boundary about, I don't even remember. But anyway, setting boundaries is a thing that a lot of people have trouble with around the holidays. When to do it, when not to do it, how to do it effectively, etc. Why we should do it. Okay, the first big thing to understand is what most people do is they either A, state what they prefer, but they don't establish a boundary. And this usually comes out in the form of passive aggression. So, for example, let's say you one of your family members is hosting a gathering. They really want you to get there early, and you tell them that you can be there later. And they say, well, all right, that'll be fine, I guess. Right? They're basically being passive aggressive. They're saying to you that they have a preference that is different than what you're going to do, but they are willing to tolerate what you are going to do. Okay? So that is not setting a boundary. Okay? The other thing that people will do is that instead of stating a preference but not creating a boundary, what they will do is they will just be reactive right away to people. So you say, hey, I can't be there at noon, but I can be there at 3. And they go, well, why even bother coming then? Right? They do something like that. They have kind of like an impulsive, automatic reaction. And you might think that that's setting a boundary. Like a lot of people think that setting a boundary is when you become an asshole or you become a bitch about it. You become angry. That's not setting a boundary. That's just being a jerk. Okay? Setting a boundary is when you clearly delineate what you are willing to tolerate and what you are not willing to tolerate. And you can set a boundary in an unhealthy way or in a healthy way. So an unhealthy boundary would be if someone said, don't even bother coming then. I please sincerely don't even show up. If you're going to show up at 3 o'clock, I don't want you there. I only want people there if they're going to be there by noon. That would be kind of an unhealthy boundary. Unhealthy, why? Unhealthy because it's not loving. It's not nurturing. It's not elevating or empowering anybody in that scenario. It's really coming from a place of survival. It's coming from a place of, if you show up at 3 o'clock, you don't value me, you don't love me, and therefore I don't want you to be around me because I'm just going to feel unloved. So I'm going to go into survival mode and tell you to not even be around me because I don't even want the trigger of you around me. So unhealthy boundaries can pop up around the holiday time. Okay. This is kind of a rare example, the specific example I just gave. That's not like the best real life example, but I think you kind of get the idea. So an unhealthy boundary is when you are doing it for your own needs primarily, even at the expense of other people. Okay, when you're doing it really just for purely selfish reasons. You're doing it to protect your ego, or you're doing it just so that you can feel like a little bit more comfortable. Okay, something like that. It's coming from either a place of I feel insignificant, or it's coming from a place of I feel uncertain and fearful. Those are the boundaries that create unhealthy scenarios. Now, there are boundaries that sometimes do need to be set, and they can be set in a healthy way. An example would be a client I just had recently. She basically had a child, an adult child of her, who was making a request, and the request would basically have really damaged my client. It was like a financial request, if I remember correctly. And could my client have done it? Yes, my client could have given their child that amount of money to get through the Christmas period. But if they would have done that, my client would have really put themselves in a bad position where not only would they be worse off, but they would be not able to provide better for the overall family. Like, it would really damage them and put them in a bad situation. So my client stood up for herself, and she basically said to her daughter, like, I love you, I care about you, here's what I am willing to do to help you, but I will not be giving you that amount of money that you asked for. That is a healthy boundary. Now, it's healthy because, number one, you're establishing very firmly what you will tolerate and what you won't tolerate. But number two, it's coming from a loving place. My client didn't do it to say, like, screw you, who are you to ask me for money? It was like, hey, I do want to help you, I do love you, I do care about you, I do want your needs to be met. But if I were to do that, that's really going to damage me in a way that's going to not be viable long term. It's not sustainable. I can't do that. And so that was a healthy boundary. So the two key ingredients for establishing a boundary in a healthy way are you want to be very firm about what you tolerate and what you don't. And number two, you need to be loving. You need to come from a loving place. It's kind of like if you're a parent, lots of you guys are parents. If you have a child, sometimes you have to go to the child and be able to say, hey, we're not going to do things the way that we've been doing things up until now because it's not good for you. And you may not like it. You may not be very pleased with me, but we're not going to continue to proceed the way that you've been proceeding because it's going to harm you, and I can't allow you to harm you. I love you too much to enable you to harm yourself. And so you set a boundary, whether it's like doing the homework or the dishes or, whatever. But it's not coming from a, I need you to fulfill my needs type of place. It's coming from a, I really care about you and I care about what's best. And I do care about me, but I care about protecting me so that I can serve you at a higher level. So I'm not going to damage myself in a way that's going to keep me from helping you further later on. Okay, that's a healthy boundary. So what I see a lot of people doing around the holiday season is they set unhealthy boundaries. They set boundaries where they're really just like cutting people out of their lives or cutting off communication or choosing not to invite people or choosing not to participate in gatherings. And it's not really from a loving place. It's really from a selfish place. And sometimes it's hard to distinguish. And so very often it's coming from a selfish place where if you're more primarily concerned with your own comfort rather than what serves the greater good. Now, there's no like cut and dry rule book here, so I don't want anybody to get offended, even though you might be, and that's okay. But I'm not saying, like, if you've been contemplating, for example, not going to your parents' place for Christmas, I'm not trying to make you feel bad for that. What I'm really just trying to do is I want you to ask yourself this. Why do you really want to set that boundary up in the first place? I run into these situations all the time around the holidays. I had a woman last year who said, well, Ty, me and my sister, we haven't really been getting along very well. And usually when I'm just around her, I just feel very nervous and I don't feel very comfortable. And she just kind of triggers me a lot. So I've been thinking about not going to my parents' house for Christmas. And I said, okay, well, let's take a look at it. Because on the surface, I could have just said, oh, don't worry, sweetheart. Just do whatever makes you comfortable. And there's a lot of like BS self-help, mental health, Instagram or TikToker people out there who will just say, oh, no, you need to set as many boundaries as you need to. Just, cut off your parents from your communication if you don't like talking to them. Get rid of your old friends. Who cares? If they don't accept you, if they don't make you feel comfortable, you shouldn't spend time around them. Your comfort is number one. And I'm here to tell you that is bullshit. And that is going to lead you to a very isolated, lonely life. If you prioritize what makes you feel comfortable always as your North Star of your life, especially around the holiday season, that shit is going to bite you in the ass. And here's why. If you just do what's comfortable, first of all, if we were just going to do what is comfortable, we might as well just skip the holidays entirely, shouldn't we? Like, if we really just want to do what makes us feel comfortable, why in the world would we go spend money and go out to the stores and go cook food and go travel? Why would we do that? It's the reason why the holidays are so meaningful is not because they're comfortable. The reason why the holidays are comfortable is because they fulfill other needs that we have as human beings that matter more above comfort. There are 6 needs that we all have, and I listed them early, but the first one is to feel comfortable and certain. So the reason why a lot of people want to set boundaries is because if I stop talking to this person or if I refuse to go to this holiday gathering, I can feel more certain. I can feel more in control. I can feel more comfortable. Okay? And by the way, I'm not saying like desiring comfort is all bad, but hear me out. Here's what you need to really see. So comfort is one need. Another need that we have is we want to feel good enough. We want to feel good about ourselves. We want to feel that our self-worth is intact. And this is another reason a lot of people want to set boundaries is, well, when I'm around a bunch of people, I start to feel judged by those people, so I don't want to be around them. Okay, but hear me out. So this is where it gets a little nuanced, because maybe you should not be around them, or maybe you need to do some self-work on yourself first. The third need we have is for variety and fun. The fourth need is for growth. The fifth need is for connection. The sixth need is for contribution. So the reason why the holidays mean so much is because it taps into the needs for variety, connection, growth, contribution. Okay? It's because there's a lot of love, there's a lot of contribution, there's a lot of growth. And the reason why a gift is meaningful, like when someone gives you a gift, the reason why it's meaningful is because they had to go through a certain amount of discomfort to give that to you. They had to go get it, think about it, spend a lot of time thinking about it, writing the card, doing the thing. It's not doing the comfortable thing that leads to the most fulfilling life. That's the thing that people forget. Is yes, you should have some amount of comfort in your life. But if you make comfort the number one need on your list, you are going to live a very, very small, very, very isolated life. Okay, and so what I told that client last year is, what is the real reason why you're wanting to not go to your family's Christmas? Is it because that's really what's going to cause you to grow at a higher level as a deeper person? Is it going to cause you to have way more love for other people and to feel more love from other people? Is it going to cause you to contribute at a higher level to other people? Is it going to create more variety and fun? Or is it because you are worried about not feeling good enough and you want to feel more comfortable? Is it one of those final two? And she realized it was those final two. And I said, great, well, you're wanting to avoid going to Christmas for the wrong reasons. If you end up not going to Christmas for those reasons, and I don't mean wrong as in like I say they're wrong and therefore you need to follow my rules. When I mean wrong reasons, what I mean is if you do something from a sense of trying to be comfortable all the time, and if you do things from a sense of, oh, that makes me feel bad about myself all the time, you're never going to be fulfilled with those choices. You're not going to be fulfilled in the long term. You're going to feel isolated and alone and unhappy. The only choices that make us really feel fulfilled long term are the choices that lead to more growth, more contribution, more love, and more variety and fun. And those are the 4 that you should set your boundaries around. Okay? So you shouldn't just set a boundary such as, well, you said this thing to me last Christmas and that hurt my feelings and so I don't want to talk to you anymore. That's an unhealthy boundary. That's not going to cause you to grow. A better boundary would be you differentiating between, is somebody really, truly, absolutely sending bad intentions your way, or are they really doing something with a good intention, but you're interpreting it in a way where you feel hurt? If it's the second, then you got some growing to do. If it's the first, you still have some growing to do, and maybe you just need to have a conversation with them, right, and reach a new understanding. But the last thing that you should do, the method of last resort, is let's just excommunicate family members. Isolation, separation leads to suffering. That's what you want to remember. Separation leads to suffering. And in the past 7 years, there's been a whole swarm of mental health influencers, if you even want to call them that, people who don't know what the hell they're talking about, who are all saying you need to cut off from toxic people, which really just means anybody that causes you to feel a little bit uncomfortable. The problem is that's basically like wrapping yourself in bubble wrap, right? You're never going to grow as a person unless you allow yourself to figure out where your little pain points are. Those moments when you're feeling a little uncomfortable or a little uncertain are moments and opportunities for you to grow. So you need to make sure that you're doing the right growing. I'm not saying be a doormat either, by the way. This is why it gets nuanced. It gets a little complicated, right? It depends on your specific situation. But I'm just saying, whenever you're setting boundaries, make sure you're doing it for the really, truly right reasons. Don't just set boundaries because you've justified to yourself that it's the right course of action when really you're being lazy. And really you're just trying to do what is right for you. I'm not saying it's easy to always figure that out. I'm just saying some food for thought. So anyway, I hope this has been helpful for you guys. For some reason, I cannot see any of your comments. I don't know why. But yeah, hope you guys have a great holiday. Enrollment is officially closed for December. But if you want to get on the wait list, we are going to have a New Year's promotion that's going to be really, really, really exciting, really special. We're doing a lot of cool things. We got 5 amazing bonuses we're going to be giving out, but we're only taking on about 14 people. So it's going to be it's going to fill up really quick. So if you want to be on the wait list to be considered as a client, just go ahead and put wait list in the comments. We'll make sure that you're notified first. And we'll see you then. Hope you guys have a great holiday season. Take care, guys. Bye.